Next, it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage a man known to most everyone in this room. You may be one of the lucky hundreds who know him as your pastor, as the senior pastor at Sacred Heart of Jesus Parish here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where he goes about, the work of a pastor, preaching, visiting the sick, presiding at funerals, weddings, baptisms, etc., counseling, and helping the troubled, and helping those on society's margins. Or you may be one of the millions who might have discovered Father for the first time in the recent Wall Street Journal full profile of him just 2 months ago. Or you may be lucky enough, like I am, to serve alongside him as a colleague at the Acton Institute. Please join me in welcoming the president of Acton, Father Robert Sirico.
Andrew, what a delight. I see you've read Flannery O'Connor. It's great to be with so many friends. As Chris has already alluded, so many longtime friends. I was reminded that tonight. The first literature that was ever published by the Acton Institute was published by a small printing press that was right on the corner of Ionia and Fulton. 30 years ago, Chris went in and negotiated a deal with a guy, and he and his wife have become good friends and have been to every dinner, except 2 because of illness, over these years, 29 dinners, and Ron and Rosie Hillary are here tonight somewhere amongst us, and I just want to, there you are. It puts it on a very personal level. He's long ago sold that printing company and gone on to bigger and better things. I hope that his contributions to the Institute have increased in proportion to that sale, but it just reminds me of our roots here in Michigan. And I'm just overwhelmed and satisfied with what we have done and the collaborators that we have and the friends that we have made. Now, that's all I have to say for tonight. We will now turn live to the Democratic National Debate, and we'll let you watch that. Ah, the smell of patchouli oil in the morning. As this election season draws close once again, we smell that oil in the air, and it's not just Bernie Sanders this time. Among the majority of Americans, although the majority of Americans still believe socialism to be incompatible with American values by 57%, according to a recent Monmouth University poll, a large minority, 29%, see no such incongruity between American prosperity and socialism. Now, I know that there are some of those that are undoubtedly true believers in the ideas that Trotskyite Bernie Sanders has held to, the old line thinking that caused him to involve himself in visits to Russia and Cuba and the rest. But we now have radical upstarts like Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. But I have to say that other than these ideologically orthodox Marxists, many still remain naive, perhaps well-intentioned people who see socialism as a mere shorthand for an equal and just society. Let's give them the best interpretation possible. I should know, because I was once one of them. In light of these contemporary currents, I've attempted to think back about what caused my own tectonic plates to shift. In this way, I think what Andrew is saying and what I'm saying have a great similarity. How do we enter into this debate in a language that is comprehensible to the people who find us to be as lunatic as we find them? How do we move society in light of these contemporary events? So I've gone back to think about what caused the shift in my own life. My belief in the need for a more just society had originally led me to embrace leftist activism during a revolutionary period in American history. A history when radical thinking or rethinking in politics, in religion, in arts, in fashion, in architecture, in literature, in sexuality was the norm. When everything was being turned upside down, I'm talking about, of course, the 1970s. The tumult in my own life and in the world around me left me searching for meaning and purpose. And so I fell in with friends who helped me fill that void. In 1970s California, how coincidental that we should have two native New Yorkers who migrated to California. But in the 1970s California to which I refer, if there was a sit-in, I was sitting in. And if there was a demonstration, I held high the placard sign and I led the chant. As you can imagine, my evenings were rather full. My days were filled with picket lines and protests. My evenings went on with late-night bull sessions with comrades in the struggle. And I recall one day sitting with my comrades in an apartment that I had in Los Angeles at the time, where we went around expressing our respective visions for the future. Once the revolution came, what would society look like? What were we working for? What did we want to achieve? Then we thought everyone would be equal. Classism, homophobia, sexism would be no more. We went around chanting these things and declaring them to one another, and the room fell silent and it became my turn to speak. I said, yes, when the revolution comes, we'll all shop at Gucci's. Silence joined the smoke that filled that room that hung in the air that night. Fumes that have recently become legal in Michigan. And unlike Bill Clinton, I admit I inhaled. Anne was my delightful friend whom I fondly called my Trotskyite lesbitarian. She was an orthodox Marxist. I never had the patience to be an orthodox Marxist. Karl Marx was chloroform in print as far as I was concerned. But when I said that, when I made that declaration with all sincerity, Anne turned to me and she said, Gucci? And all eyes were fixed upon me. I said, well, it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for the kind of society that we're trying to build, right? A world where everyone will have access to quality goods and services. Convincing? Anne said, Gucci? And I reasoned again. I listened to her. She said, that's so bourgeois, petty bourgeois. I don't think you're really a socialist, she said. Now let me tell you something. It's always very uncomfortable when somebody knows something about you that you don't yet know about yourself. I've been caught up in a vision for a better world. a more just society, one in which people who shared at that time my passion and my vision called socialism. And I readily embraced this without really concerning myself with the details. I detect a similar tendency in many of those who are embracing the contemporary forms of socialism and other state-first solutions to social and economic problems. The same uncritical and misguided enthusiasm, but sincere. I had a neighbor around that time who had a friend who he introduced me to. And here was standing before me an intelligent, informed, and to my astonishment, conservative person who was willing to engage the debate with me. In fact, he took me on as a project. He said he found me delightfully ignorant. And he took it as his personal mission to educate me. Now, I'm always game for sparring, as some of you who know me know. After all, you can take the Brooklyn out of the boy, but you can't take, you can take the boy out of Brooklyn, but you can't take Brooklyn out of the boy. And I told him to bring it on. And so we debated constantly in elevators, in halls, over meals, in restaurants. We almost got thrown out of one restaurant, I remember, in Hollywood. Gradually, he supplied me with a little library of reading material. And by reading and by conversation, my mind was slowly convinced. My understanding shifted. Now, not merely about economics, which is what I was reading, not merely about politics, but eventually about the fundamental realities of human existence. My shallow socialism and overall cultural Marxism began to fade. The light slowly came up in the room. Now, I recall that one of those early conversations had to do with wealth. And I made no bones about the necessity for wealth to be redistributed. It seemed patently obvious to me at the time that as long as the rich lived in luxury, many others would go hungry. To my mind, the logic was unassailable. It should deeply offend anyone's sense of justice, I said. It offended my sense of justice. So I shared with him my vision for the future, a world where everyone would have access to high-quality goods and services. Gucci's. He said to me very calmly, he said, I hope that you know that in comparison to all past human experience, most people today have access to high-quality goods and services, more than ever before in human history. I paused at this. I thought over his observation, never having really given it any prior consideration. After all, my focus was on the poverty that remained. So I went on. There's still so much misery in the world, while some have so much. What is needed is a mass redistribution of wealth to correct this economic inequality, this maladjustment. So he said, well, play a mind game with me for just a minute. He said, let's imagine that you got your wish and all of the world redistributed all of its wealth. Would you be satisfied? I said, of course I would be satisfied. Wouldn't you be satisfied? Wouldn't most people be better off? And even those who have some of their wealth taken away from them would still be able to live at a basic level of human existence, while so many more would be so much wealthier? It seemed very clear to me until he asked me this simple question. Is this sustainable? After all, what will happen the next day? And what will happen the day after that? And the day after that? What will people do? Where will they work? What do you imagine happens to the business that's providing those quality goods and services? What's going to happen to Gucci the day after tomorrow? Now, I have to admit to him, and I'm very embarrassed to admit this, but at first I didn't follow the trajectory of his thinking. I didn't know what he was asking me to look at. Then he made it very simple. He pointed out to me that the majority of the wealth of the wealthiest people in the world was not primarily in their mansions or in their boats or in their handbags or in their jewelry or in their art or in their furs, is in their businesses, in the businesses themselves, the very businesses that provide those high-quality goods and services that I so desired to be more widely available. All of that would disappear. People would have nowhere to go to work, literally, if the wealth of the world were redistributed. The wealth of the world is held, the majority of the wealth of the world is held in stocks and bonds, in bank accounts, which are drawn upon to make loans, to meet payrolls, for capital goods. All of it is held in trust, as it were. And it's put to use fulfilling the needs and the wants and the desires and the dreams of real people. All of this, I'm so embarrassed tonight to tell you, from this vantage point, was a revelation to me. This economic way of thinking set in motion a systematic reconsideration of my entire world view. And this, I suspect, is why the conversation that we have is so frustrating with people who disagree with us. We entered the debate thinking that if we can just show one or two factual errors or logical fallacies, that our opponent will be converted. But someone once said, to silence a man is not to convert him. The effort requires an entire reconceptualization of a worldview. And that is not so easy an undertaking. For me, it involved a reconsideration of what I meant by human rights. What I meant when I heard the term property rights, supply and demand, the division of labor, competition, until in the end, these, you see, had become mostly phrases for me. But through that open mind reading of those economists, of Hayek, of Friedman, of Mises, and others, I came to see how all of the source and the summit, you should pardon the expression, of economics is the human person. The source and the summit. His choices, his action. Thinking in this way about the human person ended up being the catalyst for deeper thinking. It was then that I recalled my childhood in Brooklyn. And those questions that the nun there required us to memorize from the Baltimore Catechism, that we would recite every time we were in class in the basement of St. Rosa of Lima School. Children, she'd say, who made the world? God made the world. I hear somebody already answering that. No, but you know, that's very, very interesting. That was so effective that I could go through those questions right now and there would be people in this room who would be able to answer those maybe haven't even heard the question in 40 or 50 years. But we remembered it, and it provided the foundation and scaffolding for a worldview. Who is God? God is the infinite being who made all things and keeps them in existence. And so it went on. And she built up the infrastructure of a way to think of the world and a way to conceive of my place within that world and my obligations within that world. As Andrew's already noted, much of that infrastructure has been dismantled, most especially during those fun times of the 1970s, and if truth be told, even prior to the 70s. The socialism that we face today, that is being articulated on a stage somewhere tonight, is the result of that period. It is a challenge. But my friends, I'm telling you, it's also an opportunity. An opportunity to reconstruct that infrastructure, that scaffolding. Our opponents are not merely our ideological enemies, but many of them are people really searching for justice, meaning, purpose in the world. And some of them are literally going crazy, not having found it. Ours is an opportunity not only to propose ideas about coherent economics, which entails the impossibility of economic calculation on a socialist model, and its inevitable and historic descent into tyranny. No, it's also an occasion to share an anthropological underpinning of what makes for a free and virtuous society, of what makes for human civilization. If we hope to defeat this contemporary socialist conceit, we must point to a more compelling understanding of why we are in the world, why our freedom and our property are interrelated with each other, and are interrelated in matters that are more than utilitarian, but are transcendent, meaningful, and fulfilling. 29 dinners we have had here in Grand Rapids. Almost 30 years of the existence of the Acton Institute. And many of you in this room tonight have made possible this mission. Now, perhaps more than ever, this mission is so critical. If the next generation, and the generation after that, and the generation after that, are going to save us from the downward spiral into which we see our society descending, it is going to be because of work like the Acton Institute, with other institutes like us, who can propose a better way of understanding who we are and what we are made for, and why we must build a society that is worthy of men and women made in the image and the likeness of Almighty God. Thank you very much.